Hello, criminologists and future criminologists. The next topic for us this day would be the theories of delinquency. This will be the third part of our lecture series for the subject juvenile delinquency and crime prevention. The early general theories includes the demonological theory, the classical theory, the neoclassical theory, the positivist theory, and then the critical theory. Now, these theories are just opinions coming from different individuals or opinions coming from different people who tries to explain why is it that in their place there are delinquencies or crimes that happens within their particular areas, most specifically by the French people or by these Italian people who tries to explain, who tries to study the society, who tries to study the people, who tries to study the prisoners before, just to come up with a theory wherein they are to explain why is it that these kinds of phenomena or this crime occurs within the society. Remember, the theories is just defined as ideas coming from different people but are not scientifically proven. That they try to only explain in or during their time why is it that there are crimes. Now, criminology as a science before was established by a French anthropologist in the name of Paul Topinard. Uh, but before that date, criminology was just part of the law study. Well, Paul Topinard, as a French doctor and an anthropologist, and then a head of a certain laboratory, or actually he is a director or deputy director of a laboratory in laboratory for anthropology in Paris before. So what did he do is just coin the word criminology, having an end of Gulf, India, and then Eco. Now, during this time he was being marginalized by his colleagues because of his political and then ideological ideas. In the development of anthropology, he is regarded and known by most people, specifically in Europe, as the father of criminology in Europe. Now, this comes now the Italian sociologist in the name of Raffaele Garofalo, who adopted Topinard's term of criminology and defined it as a science which studies now crime. The criminologia coined the word criminologia was coined by Raffaele Garofalo, ending with Gulf, India, and then Alpha. Now, let us try to study these theories. The first theory that we need to discuss here is the demonological theory. This demonological theory is the first school of criminology. The first school of criminology was the school of demonology or the demonology. This doesn't have own representative, but it is based upon the deterministic ideas that people commit their crimes under the influence of demons. Therefore, people aren't responsible for the behavior of crime. They cannot control their behavior. The whole world is actually a place where evil or good forces conflict with each other, and all people can do is to hope that they will get such possession of evil. These beliefs existed in early days of human history and are known as dualism or animism. Now, demonology was even present during the Christian tradition since early days, and it was cherished until then. Events that couldn't be explained in common sense were usually contributed to the acts of demons. That people before, if they cannot explain certain things that happen to their community or within their community, that one person is doing this or doing these kinds of action, they always attribute it as one of the contribution or one of the acts of demons and possessions. So further, you can see here that people tries to explain that if one people tries to do good things, meaning to say he is possessed by good evil spirits, and then if one people do bad things, they are possessed by evil spirits. That is the first uh, criminological school. The second criminological school, or the second criminological theory, is advocated by Cesar Beccaria and Jeremy Bentham. This school is the classical school of criminology. Well, before we will discuss these ones, prior to arrival of this classical theory, prior to the school's fight for reform, judges could punish criminal at their own wills, regardless of the severity of crimes, which led some to view that criminal punishment system is tyrannical. Well, Beccaria and the other members fought for punishment for specific crimes to set by legislatures and not to allow judges unbridled or abuses their power. Beccaria and his company felt that judges could only apply legislatively sanctioned punishments, trials be quick, and criminals would receive their punishment faster. During the time of Beccaria, judges were given these powers to just give any kinds of punishment that they think, and in quotation, they think it is suitable for the crime. That Beccaria and his comrades tries to look for proper way of determining these sentences or these punishments given to people. So what did they do is to promote the idea that people chose criminality in the same way they choose conformity, or that is what we know as the free will theory. Another person, of course, here that it is important is the contribution of the contribution of Jeremy Bentham, which is the utilitarian hedonism. The utilitarian hedonism is by Jeremy Bentham, and Cesar Beccaria is the free will theory. So, you can see here, therefore, that crime is possible choice of individuals' behavior. That is, a person's concept of free will includes beliefs that humans are rational beings that are capable of doing their own decisions, or that is being indeterminism. So the idea behind classical school is to fight for swift trials and clearly defined punishment. Was that criminals were more likely to be deterred if they knew that type of punishment they would receive and how quickly. So the idea behind classical schools fight for swift trials in and clearly defined punishment is that criminals will be deterred, criminals will be barred, criminals will be thinking twice if they would know what is the type of punishment will they receive and how quick will it be. The members of the school believed that preventing crime was actually more important than punishing it. But by having a clear punishment system in place, criminals would use reasoning to reduce that crime would not be their best self-interest. Well, Beccaria and his comrades tries to see that there should be, although they believe in punishment, however, it must be swift, it must be clear, wherein criminals will not be doing crimes again in the same manner if they would be able to identify that these are the punishments that will be given to them. Therefore, we can see here that the classical school of criminology tries to explain that crime is a possible choice of individual behavior. Remember, Cesar Beccaria conceptualized a certain book, or published a certain book entitled on English as Crimes and Punishment, or De Liti del Pene. Yan, on their terms. Yan, arguing for the need to reform for criminal justice system by referring not to harm caused to the victims but to harm caused to the society. He tries to explain that the greatest deterrent was the certainty of detection. Meaning to say, the more swift and certain the punishment will be, the more effective it would be. That it would also allow less serious punishment to be effective if shame and acknowledgement of wrongdoing was guaranteed in response to society's judgment. Thus, prevention of crime was achieved through a proportional or equal system that was clear and simple to understand, but by having clear punishment system in place, criminals would use reasoning to deduce or to reduce or to think that crime would not be their best interest. This will be deterring them, this will be preventing them, or people during the time of Vicaria will stop doing their criminal acts if they know that there are punishment that are swift, or punishment that is clear, or punishment that is faster. Now, the classical school of criminology was accepted by the European rulers during those times. So, the concept of free will believes that humans are rational beings, can make their own decisions. That is having the word indeterminism. So, because people are able to choose what is right from wrong, okay, they are able to have their own free will to seek pleasure and avoid pain, as supported by Bentham on his claims. They should be given punishment, but the punishment must be swift, must be guided by the legislators or the legislations, and it must be faster. That is the claim of this classical theory. That's why they have now the general deterrence and the specific deterrence. That the punishment or the reform to the criminal justice system during that time should be deterrence to the community, or to the community and to the person itself. In this, he explains that the greatest deterrent was the certainty of detection. The more swift, the more certain the punishment, the more effective will it be. So, they encourage punishment before. However, it must not be subjective. However, it must be objective. Now, later, this was acknowledged. So, punishment, or thus, punishment works at two levels. Because it punishes the individuals, it operates as a specific deterrence. So, those convicted, so that they will not reoffend or do the same crimes against. But the publicity surrounding the trial and the judgment of the society represents the decision of the jury, peers, offers general example, or what you call as general deterrence, that it will lead as a general example to the public of the consequences of committing crime. And so, if you punish a person before, it will serve as a deterrent effect. There will be a deterrent effect to the person as a specific deterrence, and it will deter the public as a general deterrence. Now, another person here is Jeremy Bentham. Jeremy Bentham, in this context, is the most popular here because of his utilitarianism, or others would say it is the felicitation principle of utilitarianism. For example, if a rape and homicide were both punished by death, then rapist would be more likely to kill the victim as a witness to reduce the risk of arrest. That is, according to Bentham, utilitarianism is a version of consequentialism. What is this consequentialism? It states that the consequences of an act are only standard or right, standard of what is right from wrong. Unlike any other forms of consequentialism, utilitarianism considers the interest of, or of human equally. That is, crime is to be prevented through fear of receiving sanctions. To stop this crime, we need more police, more prosecutors, and more prisons. Therefore, classical school of criminology argued that the most effective deterrent, the most effective way to prevent criminal behavior is to make a swift punishment rather than long trials. They felt before that criminal actions were irrational behavior came from people who would not or did not act in their best self-interest of society or in the society. In Cesar Vicaria on his free will theory and Jeremy Bentham of his utilitarian hedonism suggest to us, to people, that there are crimes that happens within the community because the punishment system is something subjective because the legislators was not able to provide a certain guide. So what it is their own free will. They choose to seek pleasure and avoid pain. And there is utilitarianism because that utilitarianism is what is good to the most people will be the one to be accepted. That's according to Jeremy Bentham. That is for classical theory. The third classical, the third criminological school is the positivist or Italian school or Italian theory of criminology. This Italian theory of criminology or the positivist theory of this delinquency is a theory advocated by our Holy Three. Now, the Holy Three that we are trying to tell are the person in the name of Cesar Lumbroso, Enrico Fini, and Raffaele Garofalo. Now, these are the Italian people who tries to explain that the word, they try to advocate that delinquency can be addressed through scientific method, which is popularly known to as the determinism. Now, when you speak of determinism, this is the belief that all events are caused by things that happened before them and that people have no real ability to make choices and control what are these things. Now, the Italian school of criminology was the first school of criminology that tried to scientifically explain the causation and using scientific methods. Well, what I am referring to as Italian school is this positivist theory. Why is it, by the way, called as Italian or positivist theory? These people in the name of Beccaria, Ferri, and then Garofalo are Italian. Naming the theory they have postulated as the Italian or positivist theory. Now, Cesar Lombroso was the first who tried to establish the connection between human physical constitution and criminality using the anthropometry and phenology. So, because people are not able to have their choices between these kinds of phenomenon that occurs within themselves, this positivist or Italian theory tries only to explain to us that this determinism or the ability to look for the scientific reason on why do people commit crime is the way for us to address delinquency. Meaning to say that they try to explain that crimes and delinquencies occur in one community because we do not look for the scientific reason. We do not identify or we do not determine what are really the problems within the community. That these problems in the community, if we try to address these things and we are able to determine now what are the causes of delinquency, and this delinquency will only be addressed if we try to seek for the scientific reasons that is awaiting to the real world to be analyzed and to be scientifically looked or to be scientifically studied. Now, Cesar Lombroso Cesar Lombroso was the most controversial character in this Italian school of criminology because being an Italian medical doctor, he roughly conducted a study on about 3,000 anthropometric measurements on dead and wounded soldiers. He developed the theory of what you call today as the born criminal and developed the classification and other types of criminal. This will be discussed on a different PowerPoint presentation for introduction to criminology to be to discuss these theories in a specific and detailed manner. Now, the book of Lumbroso is entitled as Delinquent Man or Delinquent Woman. Enrico Fini wrote a book also entitled Social Criminology, which is published at the same on the same year. Now, the positivist school puts the perpetrators of criminal acts at the center of of its interest, okay, free will. These theorists also advocated for individual treatment of perpetrators and indeterminate sentences as part of the deterministic ideas. It is this school who advocated also that man is totally determined by biological, psychological, and social factors. That these are the factors that we need to see, okay, for us to be able to determine and address this and treat these individuals. From the word positive, that is, they do not believe on punishment, okay? They do not believe on severe punishment, swift punishment. However, they believe that there will be cure to these kinds of delinquency only if we try to look at the causes or the reasons that cause the individual of committing these kinds of crimes. Not we are trying to see this today as the we're trying to see this today as our rehabilitation programs. Now, the last early theories is the critical theory. This critical theory simply views juvenile delinquency as the product of existing social arrangement. When you speak of this social arrangement, it simply tells us or blames the imbalance of power, that is having this kind of people who are rich, these people who are poor, these people who are marginal, these people who are at the top of the society. They blame them as the reason of why there are delinquencies and crimes that occur in the community. The concept of power, influence, inequality, and conflict guides this theory in exploring and clarifying the nature of delinquency. Now again, for the early criminological theories or theoretical schools, the demonological schools, blaming the existence of evils and goods that good that guides the person to do right and wrong. The classical school of criminology, who believes that delinquency will only be avoided if or the reason of delinquency is no proper punishment, no severe punishment, or no legislated or existence of proper way of punishing people. So there is punishment, according to classical school of criminology. However, it must be swift, it must be certain, it must be in accordance to what is the crime committed by individuals. The neoclassical school only tries to tell us that children and lunatics are people who cannot calculate pain and pleasure, as what classical school is trying to tell us. There is no rationality on a brain or on the understanding of a lunatic or a child, makes them exempted, or at least mitigated when it comes to punishing these minors. The other school is the positivist school, which tries to have the word determinism, that is to understand the people scientifically, and that uh, by this or by that means crimes and delinquency will be addressed. Critical school of criminology blames the imbalance of power. So the next topic here will be the biological theories, and then I hope you will again watch the next theories. Thank you for listening, and I hope you have learned something. Please subscribe, comment, or leave a comment, and then stay safe, everyone.